You get a note after a scene. This note might be from a coach, or maybe it's even from the voice in your own head. That scene didn't work. And something happens in your brain. Instead of hearing the actual note that was said, like from your coach, you actually hear something like, "You're bad at this." Or everybody saw you fail and they be laughing at you now. So the note itself might have been actually useful. There might have been some actionable information in it even, but you will never find out because your brain grabbed the emotional framing and just ran with it. Now, this isn't uncommon. It happens to improvisers at every level, really. Feedback comes in, even if it was just like how the audience was that night. And instead of processing the content or the reality of what happened up on stage, the brain processes the overall feeling. And then that feeling takes over, and it's the only thing you remember from that night. I'm continuing the series on metacognition that was inspired by some clips from the Winter Olympics featuring Eileen Gu, who dealt with this in real time on the global stage. After winning silver in the big air competition, a reporter framed her result as 2 golds lost. And instead of accepting that frame, she analyzed how the question was framed. She called it a ridiculous perspective, and then she recentered on her own evidence, which was 5 Olympic medals, the most decorated female freestyle skier in history, and she separated the useful content, which was her actual result of what happened, from the emotional framing. Like you lost something. And she responded to the content, which was the reality. So that's a metacognitive skill that we can develop that's directly applicable to how you handle notes in improv. Every piece of feedback has 2 layers. We have the content itself, which is the information about what actually happened in the scene. And then we have the framing. And that's how the information actually arrives to your ear holes. So content sounds like the second beat ran long, or maybe like you dropped the physical reality in the scene, or your information was long and your scene partner didn't know what to build on. So the framing, it's like the tone of voice that the coach delivered the note with, whether the coach seems frustrated or supportive, whether it's specific or it's vague or it's personal or it's for the whole group, whether your inner critic added its own spin before you even finished hearing what the note was. So the skill here is learning to separate those 2 layers. When you can look at a note and just find the content inside it, the thing that's useful for you, then you can take away and apply that note. You have something concrete to work with. But if you can only hear the framing, you sort of get stuck in that emotional response. Like, how does the coach feel about me personally? And you lose the note entirely. So this takes a lot of practice because the framing often arrives at us first. So your nervous system is responding to the tone and the body language and the social context faster than your conscious brain can actually process the words that are being delivered. So by the time you're actually hearing the actual note, your body has already decided whether it's safe or it's threatening. And this can happen even if you experience emotional processing delays. Your body still responds really fast automatically, even when your conscious awareness of the emotion might take a bit longer to arrive. And that decision that your brain makes can be fairly automatic. It can definitely change everything that follows. So really quick, before we get back to the episode, I've put together 2 comprehensive guides on giving and receiving notes in improv. One guide is for students and the other one is for teachers and coaches. And these guides cover why notes are really hard to process in the brain and what's happening in your brain when you get feedback and the things that you can do about it. If you teach, there's a whole section on reaching the neurodivergent students in your class, things you probably never even knew were going through your students' heads. These things help you improvise better, they help you perform better, or they help you teach better. You can find both of these guides and a whole bunch of information about what's in them at improvupdate.com/notes. Links in the description, and there's a big discount if you get both of them together. Now, back to the episode. So I want to go over a really quick mental model for receiving notes. Improv teacher Brian James O'Connell, also known as BOC, has a framework that he mentions in a really excellent document that he gives to anyone that takes a class of his. So take his class and you'll get this resource. But the suggestion is to put every note that you receive into one of three categories, which he paraphrases from an old screenwriting teacher that he had who is called Billy May. So they are, that's great, I'm going to try that. Number 2 is, that's how you would do it, but this is how I would do it. And number 3 is just, fuck you, that's crazy, I ain't changing it. BOC says that you are the only person who gets to decide what notes go into what category, but if you overload them into one of those categories, that's your problem to deal with. And I agree with that sentiment. The useful thing about this is that all three categories, they require you to find the content first. You can't sort the note if you're stuck in that emotional framing. So this sorting itself sort of forces you to engage with what was actually said. And that's our goal for this episode. BOC does add a warning here. He says, if you're constantly putting every note into category 3, that's the fuck you category, that's worth paying attention to. And at some point that stops being like discerning and starts becoming defense. And you're probably the asshole in this case. So be honest with yourself about what category a note actually belongs in. And that'll help you be a little bit more balanced about it, hopefully. So why vague notes are the hardest? Oh, those vague notes. So a specific note is easier to separate into these categories because the content is really clear. Like your initiation was too vague. That gives you something to work with. You can agree, you can disagree, but either way, you know what the note is, you know what it's about, and you can act upon it if you want to. A vague note, though, like that didn't work or something was off about that scene. I don't know. It just wasn't landing for me. Your brain has to fill in a lot of missing information, and a brain that's under this kind of stress fills in those gaps with like worst case scenarios, right? Like something was off it might become personal. Like that was something wrong with me. I suck, right? So if you give notes to other improvisers, the more specific you can be, like the easier it is for the other person to take the note. And if you receive that vague note as an improviser, you might not want to ask for more information to clarify it, because then people say, oh, you're just questioning the note, right? So feel free to throw away vague notes unless you think that discussing it maybe with a trusted teammate afterwards, or if that coach is really trusted, if it's worth it. So most of the real processing doesn't happen in the moment you receive the note. It happens later on when your brain is like replaying the interaction. This is when spiraling or rumination can happen. You rehear the note and you're replaying all these different layers of interpretation. And by several passes, that original note content has been completely rewritten by your brain into something that's bigger and quite possibly more personal than it was ever in the first place. So one thing that helps here is writing the note down as close as possible to the original words before your brain gets a chance to rewrite it. So get the actual content like on paper or on your phone or something. And then when you catch yourself ruminating, you can go back to the thing that was actually said instead of whatever your brain turned it into. And this connects directly to this evidence approach that I talked about in an earlier episode. I'll put a link in the description. Your written note is that evidence that I talked about. And the rumination is kind of more like the affirmation. It's just not trustworthy data. So for those brains that experience rejection sensitive dysphoria, feedback in general can trigger a physiological response that really feels completely disproportionate to the note itself. Might not even be logical. The body is actually responding that way anyways, no matter what you do. So telling yourself to like just not take it personally doesn't address this physiological reality. It doesn't get rid of this irrational reaction. And literal processing, it adds another layer of things. So if a coach says something like that scene died, somebody who takes things literally might hear that finality or that catastrophe in that statement. So that gap between whatever was said and whatever you're taking can be pretty wide. So what helps is recognizing that the first wave response to a note is your nervous system. It's kind of automated. And the second wave is your cognitive processing. If you can let the first wave just kind of go through without acting on it, that second wave has a better chance of finding the actual content of the note. And this might mean asking for a minute before responding if you choose to respond. You could write that note down, like I mentioned earlier. You could come back to it later after practice, or you might get an answer later on after the practice, email, whatever, to clarify the actual meaning. Doing all of these things just buys your brain time. That's the most important thing. It gives the other person or the overall situation a chance to add content that your nervous system might have skipped over. So you might do some more scenes and the answer might come, and then you're going, oh, well, that was about, and you don't need to react. Your brain isn't going to rewrite that thing. So these exercises, they train your brain to separate the objective, actionable facts from the subjective, emotional framing and judgment. Your ultimate goal here is to build the habit of verbalizing the separation so it becomes more automatic to you during notes. So in this first exercise, both players in a scene are going to take turns giving and receiving details while keeping all of this very low stakes and also very specific. I love specifics. So you'll remove all of the emotional framing and just communicate in a very objective manner, making factual observations about each other. So 2 players up, although you're probably going to pair off and do this sort of more as a warm-up exercise. So the scene partners here are going to be sitting and facing each other, fairly close to each other. Player 1 is going to make a very factual, emotionless observation about player 2. So this could be something as simple as you're sitting on a bentwood chair. Now player 2 is going to respond, I am sitting on a bentwood chair. So they're just going to basically repeat what was said. And then it's going to go back to player 1, and they're going to say whatever they saw physically when player 2 said that, such as, you raised your eyebrows. Now the players are going to swap and repeat. So player 2 is now going to start off like, you broke eye contact. Player 1, I broke eye contact. Player 2, you smiled when I said that, but then your voice was strained. So players can note anything physical that they notice, the emotion, the vocal tone, or the musicality, body language, whatever it is. So what's happening here is that you're learning to separate the objective facts, the things that are being said, from the way that they're being delivered. You can notice the facts without attaching judgments or framing to them. This, of course, also helps us in our scenes as well. What words were said and what was the framing of them. Starting to notice that for acting reasons. So if you're working on your own solo, check out the free PDF that I include with every newsletter that I send out from improvupdate.com. This PDF helps you capture notes after practice. So after practice, you can write down the notes that you received as close to the original words as you can. Next to each of those, write down the actionable content. So the PDF gives you a really structured way to do this, but of course, a notebook works too, or an app on your phone. Voice notes are great for this as well. So over time, you might start to see those patterns in your own framing, the way that your brain consistently kind of rewrites neutral notes into personal judgments or whatever. And noticing these patterns is the first step to interrupting them. So that's all I have for this one. I'm Jen deHaan. You can find more at improvupdate.com. And this show is called Your Improv Brain. Thanks for watching.